Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
City Attorney Ehrenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Cruz.
Here.
Public Defender Howitt. Commissioner Kreidel. Vice Chair Cummerland.
Here.
Commissioner Romano. Chair Schulman.
Present. Thank you. And if any members of the public are here that are going to want to speak towards the end of the meeting, please feel free to fill out a comment card. They're up here in front. Introductory comments, item number 3. Do any of the members of the committee have any introductory comments?
No.
Hearing none, we will go into item 4, approval of the Inspector General Committee meeting minutes from May 17th, 2018. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to read those.
Move approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Cruz, seconded by Vice Chair Cummerland. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. And that will bring us straight to the 6-month status report and our presentation by Inspector General John Carey.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice, and honorable board members. We're ready to give our 6-month update. Let me make sure I'm operating here. Okay. What we're going to do in the presentation, mission approach, our activities, which is the meat of the report, our budget, staffing, personnel. We have an interesting legal update to provide, and then our plans for the future and a summary of our accomplishments. And again, please, anytime along the briefing, please stop me if you have questions, comments along the way. You know, I always like to put up our mission first. It's not, I know the committee certainly knows this. This is for the public, those watching, to understand what our mission is. It's critical to provide independent and objective insight, oversight, foresight in promoting integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness in government. Ultimately, it's to enhance public trust. And again, I like to say a lot of the job is making good government better. Again, I put that in another perspective of really what we do. Our 3 really areas of focus is the oversight role, which again, most people understand this is an IG, a critical role we do to make sure that we have accountability in government for our taxpayer dollars, for the powers that we have. But just as important are those 2 other functions that we do. The insight role of going along, again, helping good people do government better, promoting efficiency and effectiveness in government. And then finally, that other critical role that we do is foresight, is looking ahead, preventing fraud, waste, abuse, teaching, training, and again, try to prevent bad things from happening, promote good things to happen. So those are our 3 areas of focus. Again, now we're going to get to our activities, which is, again, starting out with our intake, contract, audit, and then training and outreach. Investigation highlights, a big highlight. The first thing, we have a new investigator, Hugo Bellinger. Where are you, Hugo? Yes? Well, yeah, great to have Hugo aboard. Just a little bit about Hugo. He just came to us last month. He has over 18 years of experience in investigations and also management experience. So he worked at the Florida Department of Children and Families for a good while. Then he was also a fraud investigator in the private sector for a while. And the last 2 years, he's been a supervisor in Palm Beach County Division of Senior Services. So a lot of great, diverse investigative background that he brings to us, and he's also just a great person. So we're really happy to have him. He's getting right to work. Our activities, overall intake activities compared to the last 6 months. As you can see, they're generally very consistent from what we've been doing in the last 6 months. Again, this time, of all the correspondences that came into the office, 69% were complaints compared to the last time, 71%. So that's pretty consistent throughout what we've been seeing over the years. Now, of all the correspondences that came in, we had 3 that turned into investigations, that we started formal investigations out of those. 4 were referred to contract oversight. And again, a lot of times when they're referred even within house, sometimes contract oversight does an immediate project, and sometimes by the nature of it, they might put it in their planning for future projects of evaluations. And that's likewise what we do sometimes when they turn things over to audits. You'll see a couple times, and there are 2 occasions here. One of these actually turned into an immediate contract oversight project. One of them turned into an immediate audit, and the other aspects were turned into projects that may later on down the road come to fruition. And we put down where our complaints come from. The next slide is about where they come from. This is very consistent from the time the office has been open, and this is consistent with inspector generals across the country at all levels, from the federal to the local level. Again, a lot of complaints from the citizenry. A lot of anonymous complaints comes into the inspector general office. And again, most of those complaints, again, are from government employees who, for whatever reason, want to remain anonymous. They have either the perception that of retaliation potential, a number of different reasons it spans. We receive anonymous complaints from elected officials, anonymous complaints from some citizens, but there's a wide variety of anonymous complaints and a wide variety of reasons why they wish to remain anonymous. And again, this is Evangeline Rentz. Angie is here, who heads up the intake, who takes all of this in, and Cynthia, she's not here today. Cynthia Sorrell is her assistant, she's the funnel, that everything comes in the office, the correspondence. She's oftentimes the person that people see and speak to, and we could not have a better person to be our voice and our ears to the public and to people wanting to talk to the IG. Now we're going to get down to our investigations. And I've got some bragging to do about them. I've got bragging to do about all the folks in the office here, but some on investigations. This is a summary of our investigations this last 6 months compared to the previous 6 months. And later on, I'll have a slide that talks about how we've have been able to do more reports in less time. So Stu Robinson has done an outstanding job as the head of our investigations to be more efficient in the way we're doing investigations. So we've got 10 open investigations right now. We've issued 3 reports as opposed to, he's getting the running start, so our productivity and reports are coming up. 3 reports this last 6 months as opposed to the first one when he first took over. So he was first coming in. You've just been here a year, right, Stu? Where is Stu at? There he is, just about a year now, right? So he's given a year, boy, and doing great things. So you can see a progress from what he's been doing here. Now we're going to get into the cases, the reports that we've actually put out. This first report is on Loxahatchee Groves Town Management, and a complaint came in on the calculation of the contract, the CPI, which on the side there, that's the Consumer Price Index, the way they were calculating the manager's contract. And what we found is, we did find that it looks like believe that there's potential up to $10,000 over payment, the way they calculated the CPI. In the case, we referred that back to them. This report, our audit, we did an audit about just over a year ago on Loxahatchee Grove. You've probably seen this in the news. They've been in the news quite a bit, not only for our few reports that we've done on them, but some other issues that are going out in Loxahatchee Groves. So, and I'd like to use this occasion too to refer to review the terms we use on question cost. You can see the term up there, question cost. And these are terms that we use when it comes to money, IGs use. They all come out of the 1978 Inspector General's Act, which defines a number of terms about money that IGs find in their projects. And most IGs use these across the country, whether they're federal or not, they use this type of terminology. Question cost is the most broad category of cost. Question costs are usually those costs that, I like to say in the simplest of terms, that we're just not properly accounting for our taxpayer dollars. A lot of times it's not necessarily waste or fraud, but we're not accounting for our taxpayer dollars the way we should according to law or regulation or the contract itself. So, for example, insufficient documentation. A lot of times we find when they're spending money, and when you come back, you're supposed to have some type of a documentation to ensure that we're accounting properly for our taxpayer dollars. Sometimes they're not in compliance with the contract, even though the cost may be legitimate, but you're not spending those dollars in accordance with either the law or the contract. There's certain regulations of how you're supposed to be spending them and accounting for them, and approvals to spend them. Insufficient controls may be another. So this is a wide category that you'll see a lot of money that's found in Inspector Generals of just, we should be, when it comes down to it, we need to better account for money. And sometimes that money may be recovered, oftentimes not. It's just we need to better account for that money. Then there's the other two categories we use in cost are for potential cost savings. And the first category is identified. If you see that term, identified cost, or costs that are potentially recoverable. We've overpaid somebody, that they didn't rate that pay, so we might be able to recoup it. So we either overpaid a contract, a person that we might be able to recoup, or somebody's stolen money from the government that we may be able to recoup in some manner. So that's identified cost. And then the final category of potential cost savings is avoidable cost. And that's cost that when we make a recommendation to change operations, that potential within the next several years that we could save money for the taxpayer by adjusting our policies or collecting money that we weren't collecting in the past that we had the right to collect from different people. So that's money in the future that we could collect. So that's just a review on the three terms that you'll see. And on this report, Investigator Hisai Tanaka did this. Hisai did a good job on this, and she's been involved a lot out there in Loxahatchee Grove in the business out there. The next report, this is Jean Ariola's report that she did here. And this was on the Children's Services Council. And we had, this was referred to us from Children's Services because they're a special district that we have oversight of through a contract, an agreement. And basically they had an audit out there, and they found that a sub-vendor, it looks like they were suspicious that a sub-vendor was not properly accounting for the money. This was in taxis. This was in picking up different people from places, a sub-vendor to another taxi company, an overall paratransit company. And at the end of the day, we looked at this, and what we found was the transportation services vendor, the contractor for CSC's paratransit program, did not ensure that contracts with their sub-vendors accurately reflected the appropriate payments, and that there was a lack of verification created for potential overbilling passed along to CFC for payments. And in essence, what that was, Unfortunately, the contract was written, what we find at times was written pretty loose. There was not controls and requirements on the sub-vendors on how they were spending the money. So what happened, for example, the sub-vendor, when we found out that they would be trips that they would be going back to pick up an individual a number of times. And when they asked the sub-vendor, what's this about? They would say, and this wasn't until we did our audit or our investigation, we found out, well, we had to go back a number of times because they weren't here. Or, for example, wait times, and there was a lot of money being spent, and the main contractor was not demanding or not requesting, hey, we need accountability along the way what we're doing. So just after the fact, when we're asking, what are all these are some pretty big bills on, going to pick up people, that they're explaining after the fact. So the problem with that is we could not determine that there was any theft or any wrongdoing in that aspect to pass it on to the state attorney's office, but there was, so the problem with it, there was not proper controls and written documentations, so it allowed such a wide window so money could be wasted, and so that we could not determine that there was the proper controls over it. So we made a number of recommendations to tighten up the system out there, and CSC along the way, they were making taking action on our recommendations right away, and some of the things they saw that they needed to tighten up their contracting programs, their consultants, the copies of the subcontracts to see what the subcontractors were doing, and to make a closer along the way review and reconciliation of the invoices along the way. So that was out at CFC. Then we had a investigation on the Department of Housing and Economic Sustainability in the county. And this was a report of, so we had all of our investigators pretty much represented this time. Chris Dykeman did this one out here, Chris. A good report. This is an important report, I'd like to point out here, because we had some allegations that came in that was very credible allegations from people who seemed to have some very good information that about some senior management was acting inappropriately, was spending money inappropriately, mismanagement. And this was a very detailed, involved investigation, because very technical. And what we found out was that the positive side of this, 9 of the allegations that we reviewed found that the senior management was not improperly spending money, and there was not mismanagement in this, and so they were not substantiated. So to me, this shows the aspect of Inspector General's job. It's not always to get the bad guys. Our job is to find the truth. When allegations come into us, we do not have a preconceived idea. That we have strict national standards in our business that when an allegation comes in, it's an allegation, and my job is to find out whether it's true or not. And we don't, it's not, again, unlike law enforcement, again, where a crime has been committed and I have to find the bad person, here we have an allegation made and we have to determine, is it true or is it not? And in this case, we found the allegation, even though it's very credible, and from where the person who came in and gave the information, it can sound very convincing at the start. This sounded, a lot of people would consider this person very convincing, and from their perspective, it seems like some really bad things were happening. But again, our job is to dig down, dig into the facts, and find out, and in this case, there was a lot of regulations, and it's very technical, and Chris did an excellent job of defining these technical terms here, and with our counsel, Calenthia Dillard, to find out again that 9 of them were not substantiated. So in that sense, I like to say yes, we find people doing some bad things and they need to make corrective action, but we also, we're in the business of clearing people's good reputations and setting the record straight so everybody can move on down the road. But we did find in this, the DES, DES found an applicant of a housing LLC in compliance when in fact on the impact fee, when it was not. And we also found that DES was out of compliance with the county affordable housing ordinance when the advisory committee members' terms expired and they weren't filled. So we found some things that they did, and DES took corrective action on those. Now we're getting to, last time we had a couple of the board members ask about productivity and on our investigations, how long have they been in the hopper? And so, again, I want to brag on Stu Robinson again, that he's done just an excellent job since he's come in about looking at our cases and looking at being more efficient in our reporting, efficient in our investigation. So in effect, what this chart shows is we've done more reports in less time. That's the bottom line to this. When you compare the end of 2017 is in the first column and in the blue chart, and we compare that to the end of 2018, and it's also on the right side of the chart. So as you could see, down at, really, if you look at the bottom up on these charts, we had a couple of investigations that were 2 years or older. And there's a number of different reasons why investigations may be that older, and I like to explain the work we do in investigations is like when you come to the emergency room and somebody may be in there with a cut on his arm and they're treating it, but if somebody walks in the door with a heart attack, you have to stop and you got to move to the person with a heart attack. And so that's some of the nature of some of these old cases. We had cases which were important and we were working on, but we had some heart attacks that came in the door that we had to shift our few resources. As you know, we're down, we're just over half staffed. So we have to shift those few investigators we have to more important investigations. But nevertheless, Stu has done a great job, and we just have now one that, and it will be finished within the next week or so, that we're wrapping that up, and that's going to not, and again, it wasn't a major case. In fact, it's not going to rate a report. It's going to rate a letter back to the city, follow up on it, because not all investigations turn into formal reports. Some of them turn back into just a letter to the city or to the county on what we found. And so he's done a good job on, as you can see, basically, in the bottom line of it, we've done twice as much reports as we did last year in less time, because it also shows, the very bottom column shows now we're down to 10 months, 10.4 months for an average open investigation, as opposed to what we were at 13.3 months for an open investigations. And I like to say, unless you're really, Stu's, everybody's heard me say this in the office, that I don't like birthdays. So we don't like birthdays for reports, for audits, for investigations, unless sometimes there's a reason for that, but we like to get them done, within a year. So we're now doing our average within a year. So we're doing really good there. Okay, contract oversight. Well, let me go back just to talk. This is just kind of a summary of some of the things we do. And I'm going to have Karen Mayer, our Director of Contract Oversight, come up shortly and talk a little bit about some of the unseen activities they do. And I always like, again, to talk about the contract oversight folks. They're my patrolmen on the street. They're the folks who are out and about, who are looking and helping and preventing and giving good advice along the way. So a lot of their work is preventative. A good portion of their work is preventative. And so we don't see the benefits often of what they do, because it a lot of times doesn't end up in that report. So they do all types of things. Again, they monitor 90 contracts just this period $231.2 million worth of contracts they monitored, and meetings they attended, 44 meetings at the county, the city, contract selection meetings that they attend, and again, provide advice, counsel, best practices from other folks. And here's the activities, the reports. These are the things that you see from the contract oversight compared to the last 6 months. You can see about the same. 2 reports, made some good recommendations, found some potential savings, some money question cost, and they also put out, we'll talk about the tips and trends that they put out in training. This is the breakdown of the oversight during the meetings that we attended, the contracts we looked at during this last 6 months. That's the breakdown. So you can see half the county, half to the municipalities, and then the special districts are Children's Services Council and Solid Waste Authority, which even though they're 2 small districts, they spend a lot of money in contracting, so we provide oversight to them. Now this is our report that we did on Solid Waste Authority. Now this came in, we had a county commissioner / they're also the board members of the Solid Waste Authority, had some concerns about some contract management at Solid Waste Authority on hiring of consultants and the way they were managing the contracts in this specific area. And they asked, she asked us to look at this. So it shows you, we get complaints and requests from, again, not only citizens, but from county commissioners, from city commissioners, to look at different things, and then we take and we evaluate that, and if it has value, and we usually, by the time when a senior elected official or a senior person in government wants us to look at something, we take that very serious. And so in this case, this was something that serious needed to be looked in, and we looked in. So this came through, and this is another good example about the IG system. This came into, as a complaint, into Angie. So it came into intake. It then went to Stu Robinson, the head of investigations, and we make an evaluation. Not everything turns into an investigation per se. Some things sometimes turns into audits, sometimes investigations, a wide variety, but we have the whole office to look at and all of our resources. This was a contract area where you really needed some expertise in contracting. Well, we have a contract oversight division. And Tony Montero, Tony's not here today, but I don't think he's not here, but he led this. And this was a joint, this just wasn't Tony doing this, this was a joint project between investigations and contract oversight, but contract oversight had the lead on this. And so they worked this thing, and we did find in this that there was insufficient documentation when they obtained the consultant contractor. They used as a justification that in some of their documentations it says that when there's a, quote, set of such unusual circumstances that would justify waiving the normal procedures for hiring consultants, that the director could do this. And that's a good statement, but you need to have some justification. What was the such, quote, what was the such unusual circumstances? And the answer was, well, just I have the authority to do that. I determined. And so we question that in the fact that when you state that I have, when it is such unusual circumstances, there should be some articulation rather than what they stated. Well, we normally don't have that. We didn't have that expertise in-house, so we had to contract it out. Well, my answer to that is, well, that's usually why you contract everything out, is because we don't have the expertise or the resources in-house, but we have normal selection processes and bidding processes for that. So you have to give me something other than it's just not, we don't have that expertise in-house, or we don't have those resources in-house, because frankly, isn't that why we contract out everything? and they really couldn't provide any other articulation other than that. So we questioned that. And we recommended that in the future that they provide more articulation, what were the such, quote, such unusual circumstances that you forego the normal contracting procedures. We found that they exceeded the contracting authority by extending the consultant's contract beyond the 3 years without board approval, which was required. And they also paid the consultant for services performed after the contract had expired and in excess of the contract amount. So we found some things they needed to tighten up there. We made 9 recommendations for them to strengthen their controls and to manage their contracting more effectively out there. And they accepted all the recommendations and are doing them. Yes, sir.
Roger Romano for the record. Could I ask, so does part of your oversight include looking at vendor specifications to, sorry. Not used to this yet. Does part of your function include looking at vendor specifications to make sure they're not unnecessarily restrictive so that only certain vendors would then, so that otherwise competitive vendors would be disqualified? So in other words, you see what I'm getting at?
Yes, exactly. We do, that is part of our, when we're going out and about in the selection committees, that's one of the big part of our jobs that we're doing. When we're doing at all of these selection committees that we attend across the county, that's one of the many things we look at. And we take a very close look at that. And if we determine, again, from our perspective, we've got some very good specialists in this area with years and years of expertise and not just experience, but the requirements, that they bring that up. And they let the selection committees know, the officials know that, look, this doesn't seem proper. And most of the time, we have to say, people, I think they're very cooperative with us, and when we point these things out, they take appropriate action.
Madam Chair, General Carey, I know this, as I understand it, this was about a consultant contract for a disparity study, but
Yes.
do you all do disparity studies per se?
No, usually inspector generals do not do disparity studies. That is a really niche area that we do not do disparity studies. Now, we can often determine things, we do things related to a disparity, like this, related to disparity studies where contracting was done properly. We can go and look at any type of vendor who's doing business with the government to make sure that they're providing the proper, that they were doing it within the proper criteria, but we do not do disparity studies ourselves. We do not, IGs sometimes they do things like climate surveys, depending on the Inspector General office, but usually those are left over to human resources, but it's a wide variety, but that's one area that I don't know any Inspector General that does any type of disparity study. This next project we did in contract oversight was for the town of Gulfstream, and this was a contract monitoring follow-up. From the year before, we did a monitoring survey to see across the county what the different municipalities, what was in place, how were they monitoring contracts, and we took that survey then, and we not only published a report on that so everybody could see best practices, but we also took that and then did follow-up, different follow-up projects where we thought, well, we need to go in these certain cities to help and recommend to them to potentially see how they were doing and make some ways that they might do business better. And in this, Tiffany Thomas did this. Tiffany, she came in, did this report, did a good report on this, did a good work with the city. They found that in this case, the city did not have documented policies or procedures for contract monitoring. They were not in compliance with, there's a state law that's specific about external auditors, how you select your external auditors every year to do the financial statement, and that they were out of compliance with the state law, the way you're supposed to get a selection committee set up for that. And they also had no risk assessment tools being used for risk management. So we made a number of recommendations for them to, again, tighten up their procedures, to make procedures, and they accepted all of them and are making those right now. This is the tips and trend, and again, this is the meat and potatoes of contract oversight. Preventative, out there, trying to, they're the folks to try to make sure that things aren't happening, so there's less business on the investigative side and the less the complaints coming in. This was one that they put out, a tips and trends. This year, the U.S. Office of Management and Budget issued comprehensive reforms for the way that federal awarding, including financial and program management. And the goal was to reduce the risk of fraud, waste, abuse, mismanagement of federal grant funding. And it went into effect October 1st. And so we saw this was coming out, and it was going to affect a lot of the cities, the county received federal grant funds. And so there's new law in place coming out, and we wanted to get the word out ahead of time that, hey, here are all the new stipulations required. If you're taking federal grant funding, here's new stipulations that were not in place in the past. And so doing the business the very same way you're doing will mean that you are likely out of compliance with the federal laws. So we put together tips and trends. And I want to say this is another way. The county was ahead of this themselves. So the county was putting together some guidance and information for at least the county government. And so they were doing real good. So we worked with the county on some of the information they put out, and then we developed this tips and trend, which is mainly for the municipalities and Solid Waste Authority and Children's Services Council, so they don't get in trouble. So again, the hope is that they will make sure that they're in compliance so we don't get complaints, and when we're out there, we don't see that they're out of compliance after the fact. So this is just one of the areas that our contract oversight office does to try to prevent and get ahead of bad things happening. Sir.
Real quick question. Of the 90 contracts that you guys look at, how many are proactive that you're actually out looking for, and how many, I don't need an exact number, I'm just trying to get my hand around it.
The majority of contracts, I would say 98, 99% of the contracts that we're looking at is proactive. So we are going out, people usually aren't coming to us and ask, sometimes they do, which is good, please come to look at it. By the county ordinance, the county and the municipalities are required to inform our office when they're having selection committee meetings. So they're required to notify us they're having a meeting. And so when they do that, we look at those and we try to go to as many of those meetings that we can. So the contracts, we go to the meetings, and contracts we look at, most of them are proactive. The ones that you see here that end in reports are a small part where people have complained or have asked us to look at, had concerns about it. Those we will now dig down into deeply. But most of the work from contract oversight is proactive.
Okay. So for instance, next year with these new federal guidelines that you just kind of mentioned, will you kind of do some sort of proactive look at different municipalities, or do you kind of follow up on these trends and the different things that you're talking about? That's what I'm kind of...
Yes, we will follow up. Now that we've put the guidance out, not only for the municipalities, but for the county, we will then follow up over the next years. That'll be one of the things in the big pot that contract oversight looks at, that we pull out and we look at selectively to make sure that we're in compliance with federal guidelines and federal, county, state guidelines.
Thank you.
Now, I like this, just again, speaking about contract oversight, again, we talked about it, that what the public sees of contract oversight is the tip of that iceberg. And again, so much work that they do that is very valuable and is very, that makes, I mean, can sometimes be very extremely valuable in preventing some bad things happening, is under the scenes, behind the scenes, under the water line. So I'm going to ask Karen Mayer to come up. I wanted her to just give 3 examples of very significant below the water line work that she's done, and she and her whole team does just a great job at this proactive type of work. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen to talk about just three examples.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to be brief. What we end up with is like this, and I'm condensing it down to this for you because I don't think that you really want to hear all the details. First of all, we received a complaint through our intake process, and the complaint was about the county's mosquito control program. The county contracts for a contractor to fly missions to disperse insecticides. So the allegations were that pilots flying these missions were not appropriately certified, that the county provides the chemicals that are used, that they couldn't be covering the acreage that they said, that the vendor said they were covering, and they had a problem because the same vendor had been used for, they said, 32 years. So we went and we looked at all of that, and that involved Tony Montero, who's not here today, fortunately was a pilot at one point. So he understood about FAA regulations, and he had to come a little bit up to speed because things have changed since he was certified as a pilot. What we found was that the pilots were certified appropriately by the FAA. What had happened is this company is owned by an individual who is an older pilot. And since at least this contract has begun a couple years ago, he has not flown as a pilot. He's retired as a pilot. But he does fly with new pilots, helping them understand how to use the dispersal system, because this dispersal system that they have is high pressure, it's patented, and it covers more acreage than other systems do. So the allegation was this man was flying. He was in a plane, but he was not the pilot in command. Somebody else was. One of the interesting things we found out is this vendor cannot provide the chemicals. The county has to provide the chemicals. And it kind of made sense when you thought about it because it's a security issue. You know, somebody could take up a plane and be spraying stuff all over Palm Beach County, and that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing. So the county disperses the chemicals and they say, okay, you're going to go spray 140 acres. This is the amount of chemicals you need. Here they are. The other thing that we found was we went through the solicitation. We read the RFP. We looked at the vendor requirements. We looked at the scope. We looked at all those kind of things. And we did not find them to be restrictive. There's not a lot of companies who do aerial spraying. So we found that the solicitation was acceptable. So that was a lot of work going into ensuring that the allegations that were made, we found them not to be accurate. Secondly of all, Tiffany Thomas, who we referred to before, works within the city of Pahokee. So she was following a solicitation, and it was a solicitation for construction work. And what we found as we were going through that process was that the city had not followed its own policies appropriately. And the biggest reason we could come up with for that having happened, or what we were told by the city manager when we met with him, is that he had delegated that task to somebody who really was not trained. They really didn't understand all the details of what they were supposed to do. And he took responsibility for that, as well he should. What could have happened from that is that if they had not hired a good contractor who actually knew what they were doing, was reputable, and is producing a quality product, the scope was not clear enough to really ensure that that was going to happen. So we talked to him about, you know, you have policies and procedures. When you're going to do this kind of work, if you're going to do an RFP, that's fine. If you're going to do a bid, that's fine. But you have to follow your processes, because there's an inherent risk if you don't. So we had a conversation with him and basically put him on notice of these are things you have to fix, and we'll continue to look at your procurement. And if you don't fix that, then if we have to come back again and have this discussion, it'll probably be a different discussion, and you'll see a report up there on the slides instead of it being something that's under the water line. Third, we had an issue with another county contract. The county has a voluminous process about how approvals are given. When the county commission approves a construction project, the department that is doing that construction has a lot of latitude. They can approve up to this much in change orders. Then above that, it goes to what they call the contract review committee. Beyond that, it has to go back to the county commission. In this case, Mr. Montero, he goes to the CRC meetings, and he found a change order that made him twitchy, basically, because it was a change order to eliminate part of a road project. What they found as they were doing this road project was that a developer had bought the land on both sides of the road project, and they were developing, and part of that road, they were going to build at their own expense. So the county didn't have to do that. So the county, in essence, was trying to reduce the contract and terminate out that part of the contract and pay the vendor for the fees that they had incurred so far. The problem was that the documentation that was submitted showed markup or profit, if you will, for the subs, for the prime, and there was really no justification for that, because when the contract was bid, it was bid different line items, and all of that was included in the line item. So when we asked the county about that, the county said, well, it's also funded by FDOT. So we used the Florida Department of Transportation rules, and they have this rule that says that when you terminate something, you know, you can give them this percentage, that percentage, whatever. But they really weren't adequately using that. The end result was that this developer, because of what he's going to do, is going to take on the cost of paying that $80,000 approximate $1,000 for the county. So we said, okay, it's not government money now, so we're not going to opine further about this. However, this has identified a systemic issue, which is that you're really not clear when you're terminating part of a contract, or maybe terminating all of a contract. Probably easier when you terminate all of it, but when you terminate a part of a contract, how are you going to do that appropriately so that you document why you're paying people and what you're paying them? So by Tony being there asking those questions, that got the CRC chair to ask questions. What ended up happening is a representative from FDOT came out, and he met with, Tony was there, the CRC chair, the folks from Engineering Public Works, the folks out at Water Utilities found out the meeting, went, can we come too? So they came too. And what the county found was that they weren't using the current FDOT regulations. There were ones published after that. And what was really great is this guy from FDOT gave all of them great technical assistance. So all of these people were like sponges, wanting to do the right thing, but not really understanding how to do that. So really, because Tony asked those questions, it got people thinking, and it got them really processing what should we be doing and how can we do better. So that was another great one that was really, we all felt good about that one. John? Sure.
Okay. Using your first example
Yes.
of the pilot, that sounds like a person that would be a fairly small business.
Yes.
Are your investigative processes designed to minimize disruption and cost to people being investigated?
Yes, it's one of the things, we joke in our office about how we're kind of the white hats, because when we come out, we're not usually doing an investigation, we're not doing an audit, we're really trying to figure out what's happening, and we work really hard with people. We know that they have other jobs. We know that what we're asking them is only one thing in a small realm of their whole duties. So if they ask for extensions, if they ask for, can we give you this instead of that, we're open to all of that, because we really try to work with them, because our goal is to help them do good things. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And I just can't, again, talk enough about contract oversight. It's a unique This is very unique. Most Inspector General offices do not have this office involved. And when I came here, it was new to me, and I was like, what are these guys? Who are they? What do they do? And I have become just such a big fan of this because this is the preventative nature. And sometimes people might ask, well, why aren't you catching so many bad guys? Well, it's because we're preventing, because we are so active in the preventative role. You know, we're preventing a lot of things going off track through this contract oversight office and the WISE good, I mean, these are experienced, seasoned people who understand contracting and to just have great judgment, what you have to have in this business. And so, Karen and the whole team, thank you. Okay, now to audits. And let me answer also for the commissioner about trying not to intrude. It's really not only in contract oversight, but any projects we do. The rule of thumb is we give people, we understand they're trying to do business out there. They're trying to do a job. And so we try to work with them and give them time. You know, we give extensions. We work with them to make sure. I tell folks, everything that we do in this business, it's happened to me out when I was not in the IG. I've been investigated, audited, inspected, you name it. And so I understand. It's not pleasant, and it takes some time away from your other things, so we try to keep that in mind. And I might say I was found it was not substantiated in the investigations, just for the record. I came out okay on all of them. Okay, audit. And again, now I'm going to brag on Megan Gaylord, my director of audit over here. I tell you, since she has come, she has really dramatically, Megan, you've been here now a year and a year and a half, almost 2 years, dramatically rearranged the way we're doing our audits. So what she's done, basically, we're able to do more audits. We've done smaller scoped audits to be able to go more places and touch more cities and yet still find the big things. So she's found a way to be more efficient and effective, and the way she's doing the audit business dramatically, again, has increased. The year before, we'd be doing good, usually have like 4 audits per year, 4 to 6 audits per year. Just last month, she did 5 in 6 months. Now she did 8 in this last 6-month period of the audits that she's doing. Again, making recommendations, finding money that we should be having better accountability of, finding money that we can save, making referrals that she's really good. And this is another thing, the referrals that she's made here, we note the 7 referrals. For example, here's where they've gone in the business, because they're not just looking at what they're doing, but who else needs to know about this or see about this. She's made a referral to the Environmental Protection Agency, to the County Health Care Department. She's made a couple referrals to external auditors of things they need to know about when they're doing their audits. Made referral to the State of Florida Department of Financial Services. So, and to the AGO. So, I mean, she's looking at, their office is looking at who else needs to know about the things that they're finding that might have business here. So they're really good about doing that type of work. So that's overall. So we'll get into the details now. This is an audit that Donna Wisniewski did. Is Donna here? Hi, Donna. There she is. Donna did this one. This is a case, again, on the Water Utility Department. This came in as a complaint. So this was a complaint that came in, again, through Angie. The hotline went to Stu and Investigations, and we saw, because of the technicalities of this type of complaint, instead of doing an investigation, it needed to be a very focused forensic audit. And so, obviously, it's because it dealt with dollars and cents and some real technicalities that was more suited for an auditor. So this was then turned over to the audit division to do a forensic audit on these allegations that came in. And so what they found as a result of the audit, that there was a lack of proper approval and authorization. The written instrument that was signed by both parties was not completed in order to modify the agreement that they had. The head of the organization reduced the capacity, the reservation fee to the recipients from $2 million to $1.5 million, and credit was not recorded properly accounting, and so it was understated. Now, with all that said, that sounds bad. What was done, and is in the report, which this is a snapshot of one slide here, that what was done to obtain some business to the county was all done in the open, so there was not anything done nefarious. There was some procedural practices that weren't done according to county policy and their own policy. So there was some procedurally things wrong. So this may sound significant, and it was in that sense, but on the other hand, they were what was going on in the water utility department was known by the county commission and senior members within the county. And it was just some procedural things that they didn't follow their own procedure, they didn't follow the county procedure, and we made recommendations to make sure that that didn't happen in the future. The next audit was done by Radislava. Is Radi here? Radi, you're going to see her name on a lot of these. She has been really productive here doing a number of our audits. This was on Palm Beach Gardens on the economic incentive programs. And this we went out from some of our previous surveys, and we do a look at different cities and the counties on how they're doing a wide range of economic programs. So this one, what we found is that there were generally adequate controls in place, which is a good thing. We did find that they needed to tighten up their written policies and procedures. There were some inconsistencies in the review process and inconsistencies in monitoring. So again, sometimes we're not always looking for the money or real bad things, but we do find usually that's the nature of audits, to help people tighten up their policies, tighten up their procedures and training. And again, this is one of the areas where we're just helping people make good government better. We did a survey during this time. Hillary Brogen did that. Hillary is out here. She was the main lead on this survey that we did on purchasing cards. This is a good survey because we used it this year, and we're going to use it in this coming year now to conduct audits. So this is basically surveys help us gather information to do a risk assessment on where we should be focusing our audits, and what municipalities may need some more look than others. So what we found in this survey was, again, 95% of the municipalities did have some type of a program in place. The 2018 expenditures, wide range, what they spent, used their purchasing cards from $1,500 to over $9 million. It's just different policy, not necessarily good or bad, because they may have reasons for that, but it just shows there's a wide range of what municipalities use their purchasing cards for. 83% of the municipalities had written procedures. 72% of the municipalities either had an external audit or a review conducted of their program. And now I know I see you're not laughing, but this is some IG humor here to the bottom right of the slide. Don't fear audits. So that's IG humor there.
We're laughing on the inside.
Okay. So anyway, so we're taking that, and we made some suggestions to all the folks. If they weren't audited, they need to be audited. They need to audit to make sure that their programs are compliant in place, and also gave some benchmarking there for folks to look at. This was an audit done by Donna Wisnowski on Mangonia Park on their water utility cross-connection. And the cross-connection programs keep water from becoming contaminated or mixing. And it keeps, for example, irrigation water from mixing with drinking water. And so in this sense, we had questions asked to us about this. Do you go out and do regulator type of work? No, we do not. This was not a regulation to go testing water. There's state organizations that do the testing of water. We audit compliance with policies and regulations. So this is just another type of audit that we do to make sure that they're in compliance. Though this was referred to the state EPA, and they were very happy that we're doing some of these audits because they're very concerned, obviously, about people being in compliance with these standards, and so they may come out and do the actual more testing. So this one we found that they were not in compliance with the Safe Water Drinking Act. They didn't have an active cross-connection program. They didn't have written policies, testing, monitoring, or a list of testable devices. So the corrective action, they were very, once we came out there, they had, immediately once we went out there, they saw they had a problem. They jumped right on it, and they didn't wait for the audit to be concluded. They started taking corrective actions, and they're working with an outside consultant to make sure that their program comes up to compliance. Sir.
Thank you. Mr. IG, who instigated this investigation? How would you start an investigation like this one?
Yeah, these are audits, and most of our audits come from a risk assessment plan. At the start of every year, we do a risk assessment and analysis. We do surveys, and we question a lot of people. Out and about questioning. We review cities' financial statement, their audits, a wide range of people we talk to look at where are the risks. And this came up as a risk, that some of the cities that believed that they had some problems on non-compliance with, again, this issue of the cross-connection, which a lot of people aren't familiar with this. It came up, and so we said, okay, let's take a look at this. And what we found, it's a good thing we did, we found not only this city, but you'll see there's some other cities we do and are not in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so we're going around and looking at a number of cities in this. So IGs, and I also get this question, hey, this doesn't do with money. This isn't fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, our mission is not just to detect, deter, investigate, and prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. It's within our ordinance, it's to promote efficiency and effectiveness in government. And so part of it, this is efficiency. This is about efficiency, effectiveness, compliance in government. So this is a standard type of audit that IGs do across the country from the federal to the local level. But again, sometimes we get asked, this isn't about fraud. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be looking for fraud. No, we really want to prevent fraud from happening. We want to prevent bad things. And so this is, again, one of the many types of audits that we do. Did that answer your question? This was another audit by Radislava on the town of Ocean Ridge and their capital assets. So again, we're trying to get out this year. That's another thing. We're doing smaller audits, smaller scoped type audits so we can touch more cities, because before we've been in existence for years and there's a number of cities we've never been to. We've never been able to look at them. So by these smaller scoped audits, we're able to get out and take a look at all of the folks underneath our jurisdiction. So we're able to give a wider span and look. And when we do, we find things, again, constantly that we can make recommendations to help them make our government better. In this case, in this audit, in capital assets, we found that some of the capital assets could not be confirmed in existence. So they had things on their books, the bottom line, but they couldn't confirm where they were. We found that the town did not include the capital assets that were on the insurance list. So they had the insurance list that they had insured was not consistent with their capital asset list. And so actions taken, the town is updating their capital asset records as a result of this. This is an audit on the audit of town of Glen Ridge on revenue and credit cards. Small town, but we, again, needed some look at. And this is one Jennifer Timms did. Jennifer, there's Jennifer, did this one. A good job on this, and again, working right along with the city management on this. What she found out there, that there was they lost some potential interest revenue on a bank account because they had their bank money in a lower yielding bank account for interest rates. And there was banks around that with higher interest rates that they could be putting their money in and earning more money on their interest. There was no participation in the credit card reward program, some money there they could be receiving back. One thing they found, they misclassified some of their revenue. This is not good, so their revenues as expenses. And so as a result of that, because they had their misclassified the revenue as expensive, it put their balance out improperly about actually what the expense of what their revenue was, what the town had. So they had the lack of proper controls and oversight of revenue receipts and credit cards, and we made a number of recommendations to help them improve the operations out there. Green Acres, another one by Roddy, did that one out there. See, I told you, she's busy out there. She's doing a lot of audits out there. That was on their capital assets. And again, we found there that there were certain capital assets that could not be confirmed as in existence, inaccurate records for impaired or obsolete capital assets. This is just an example that on their capital assets, they had an amphitheater that they intended to build. And we went out, we asked, where's your amphitheater? And we went out, and it was just a big empty space, that a yard. So that's what they called the amphitheater, was an empty space with grass and trees around it. And it kind of had a dip. If you had a good imagination, you could imagine that was an amphitheater. So they're correcting their records on that. And that there were also a lack of computer user accounts to access the policy. And again, made corrections to help them get things back in line a little better. And this is an audit now on the town of Jupiter on their credit cards. And this is another one that Hillary did, and Kathy Davis really worked a lot. Kathy, say hi on that, did a lot of work on this with Hillary. And this one was on credit cards. This is one of our most recent ones we did on Jupiter. This is one we gave them because they said they could not provide the records. We gave them, what was it, 4 months around there or so? Yeah, it turned into 8 months to provide us records. Eventually, we just told them, we got to do this report and, try to finish out. So, I mean, we gave them months and months. So we give people a lot of leeway in trying to provide records. But at the end of the day, we have to do our job, and we need to finish this thing up. So this extended this report quite a bit. And what we found out there is that they lacked proper approvals, lacked adequate documentation, potential revenue was lost through credit card rebate program. They had former employees that they were still, only for a few days, but they were using former employees' credit cards for use, not a good thing, and lack of sufficient documentation. And I have this next slide talks just a little bit more about this audit. Oh, this one. So this started out with the audit, the planned audit that we were doing. Went into data analytics, and we are really getting into data analytics now. Hillary is our data analytics expert. She is really, not only does she do data analytics for this, but she does it for a lot of our other programs. So she's behind the scenes working, doing data analytics. And that's basically running things like, for example, instead of looking at every single receipt, we're able to look for codes on credit cards. You can pick out codes on credit cards that are high risk. You can put in keywords and look for certain things on this data analytics, which will point you faster and more efficiently to where the high-risk areas that you need to look at. And so we use the data analytics on this to find, we're finding so much more through this than we've found in the past. And again, Hillary's just doing a great job with us on that. So again, we use the keywords, find out through those data analytics, the high-risk transactions that we identify rather than just trying to do, when you do, the other method is to do a random sample. And so just by doing a random sample, you pick just a portion of it. Well, in this way, you can take the whole population and do that data analytics, and you can find so much more by doing this, areas that you need to look into. So we found lack of documentation, a total of $83,000 of question cost. And here were some of the types of question costs we found in there. Sometimes not a lot of money, but this is taxpayer dollars. In the big, I guess a lot of money is relative according to who you are. To me, $4,000 is a lot out of my budget. Over $4,000 of gift cards that weren't properly accounted for. Food purchases, documentation, you know, tickets to Dolphin games, Marlin games, Sunday brunches, tablets. Now again, I want to emphasize, we did not find, as we dug down in here, enough to conduct an investigation. We found out that it was improper accounting, and when you have improper documentation and accounting, those are risk areas that if you don't get control of, they lead to the potential for fraud, waste, and abuse. For example, just the gift cards, for example. If they say, okay, we use these gift cards and they had a special program, we buy these gift cards and we give them out for this program. That's in a general sense of accounting. But when we say, okay, could you provide us more detail on how many gift cards and who did you give these gift cards to? Well, you know, it was just for this program. Well, that's too general. We need to account for our taxpayer dollars to some account that, for example, we use these gift cards because it was a family day or it was a Citizens Day, and here are the people we gave, here's a list, or here's a group that there were so many people assigned for that we gave these gift cards to. And so we find this, and we found this in other municipalities, that they just, well, no, we just normally get gift cards and give them out. But again, if there's not accountability, more specificity in the accountability, some of those cards and tickets can be going to the people who rate them, but also there's not accountability or checks and balances to make sure that some of those gift cards are going into my pocket or to my family's pocket or somebody else's pocket.
We have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Carey, what is the ostensible reason that a municipality would spend $13,601 on sporting event tickets and Sunday brunches?
I have the same question.
Yeah, and this was over a wide period of time. Maybe I'll have Megan, can you talk about that, Megan? This was over, I forget the period of the audit, and there's sometimes I could just say, I'll let Megan talk on this. This happened in the past on an audit we did in Riviera Beach where they took they had a whole junior football program out, all these junior people, you know, to try to get them involved in community events. And so they took the whole football team with chaperones down to Miami Dolphins game. Okay, because they're trying to get, you know, young children involved. But the problem there we found, I think it's similar to this, is, well, did you have okay, that's good that you said that, but do you have any more specificity that the tickets to the Miami Dolphins game, I know children went and I know some chaperones went, but you know, are we making sure that tickets didn't also go to, you know, my friend, my family, somebody else? We need to assure the public, and again, that's part of it. We need to just assure the public that the normal person who would walk in the door, if I'm John Q. Citizen, that they could say, okay, that makes sense. It's not. In our business, we like to say, we talk about internal controls. Trust is not an internal control. They often say, just trust me. Trust is not an internal control. That's a bad, I love trust, but that's not a good internal control. So Megan, I'll let you.
For the record, Megan Gaylord, thank you. The entertainment tickets, the Miami Dolphin tickets, and some of the different events went to two different programs that they had. They had a senior citizens program where they had a group of elderly people that would come and gather and go to these programs, but they either lacked approval or they lacked documents to where there was no way to determine if that's really what the tickets went to, other than they had a receipt that said they spent $6,000 for these tickets, but never who went or the details about the actual activity. They also had some different parks and recreation programs that used the tickets for children and events like that, but the same thing occurred. Either it lacked proper approval or they didn't have any additional details for whether they really went to those types of events.
Is that going to turn into an investigation, or just the recommendation is to have policies for the future to ensure? I understand that it just needs to be documented and each municipality can come up with its own rules, but it just seems a little questionable.
The problem with it is without the lack of adequate documentation, you can't tell where it went. So we know how much went and we know which person bought, but they can't tell us which people went. So with the events happening over a year ago, there's no real way to figure out exactly what they did with the tickets because they didn't keep records or the documents.
This might not have a resolution or answer to it, but it seems like getting rid of or not keeping documentation then rewards the act. So I'm hearing a message that if you don't keep good records, you're not going to be investigated. And it sounds like it could be a perfectly proper purpose for a good cause, but who didn't keep the records, who was supposed to, and I understand we're not looking for wrongdoing or to point fingers. That's not the job here, but how do we send a message that proper record keeping isn't going to protect these municipalities from oversight?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that is an issue that we deal with in the business is often, what do you investigate, what do you not? And again, there's so much that comes in the door, and we're doing triage with, I suppose if I was fully staffed, I may look into this. But when you're half-staffed with investigators, you set your priorities. In this case, again, we did not find another red flag to determine, okay, we think there may be fraud here. The report, the recommendations made to the city, so first of all said, you need to tighten up in the future, and they accepted the recommendations. So one, the city accepted the recommendations that we made. Number two, that's another value of an inspector general where our reports are all public. This was in the news, I think a number of nights on one of the stations. And so the public pressure of our reports often pressures, the city that, okay, if they weren't intending to take action, it puts it to the citizenry enough that they know now I need to take action to tighten up our controls. So we made recommendations in this place so they would have better documentation, better oversight of these matters, and we'll be back. If not, we'll be back again. But there just wasn't enough in and of itself because we got to value not only that, spending an investigator out there, is an investigator going to find what's the likelihood of investing a person, which turns into at least a person for 6 months to a year? Are they going to be able to find much more than we did, other than they didn't keep proper records? The most we could find is they should have done it. We think, as far as we know, we think everybody who was supposed to have a ticket got a ticket. But so it comes down to investing one of my few investigators for 6 months to a year to come and, we're going to find much more than what we did.
Well, without any red flags or indicia of any kind of wrongdoing, nobody's coming to you and saying, oh, I know this person was included in the
Right.
group and they had nothing to do with the children or the seniors. So without any of those indicia, I can understand
Yes.
why you wouldn't want to look into it just for the sake of it. But again, I am hearing
It's trouble.
a message that, the record keeping is what's the most important, so that these things can be questioned, and then assuming they are all proper, and I think that's the first assumption, is it was proper until proven otherwise, but at least then you have the ability to look into it. So, I'm glad this is being brought up.
So it used to be, back in the olden days, you couldn't sue a dog owner whose dog bit you unless the dog had bitten somebody else first. It was called the one-bite rule. We all learned it first year law school. Do you have a one-bite rule for this? Like if they don't clean up their act, you say, okay, this is continuing to happen. At some point, do they go over the line and you say, you're not documenting this, we have no idea whether this is going in your family's pockets?
Yes. Well, we see the interesting aspect of the whole IG concept. We really have no authority to make anybody do anything. We have the authority to shine the light of the truth on the matter. If it is a criminal matter, then we work with law enforcement, or we can investigate. But at the end of the day, the check on us is that, because I have wide-ranging powers, that they have to let us come in and audit, investigate. We've got subpoena authority. We can look at anything we want to, but the check on us is I can't make anybody do anything. Then we have to depend on the citizens. Are the citizens tired enough of where they're going to take action and make their elected officials do business? We've got, there's one city that right now we've got so many complaints on, and I've had to tell so many of the citizens, like, look, this comes down to, most of this stuff is about a proper accountability, and we've made these recommendations before, and if the city is not implementing them, that about it, these are issues I really can't answer for you. They have to be answered in the voting booth. And so the most we can do, we'll be back when we have indications, when we have a follow-up process. What we can do is, when we be back, and we'll come back and we'll do another audit. If we find the same things, we'll show they're repeat audits, and if it is enough to investigate, we'll do it. But that's the best we do. We're that flashlight. We're going to keep shining that light. We're going to keep coming back, and hopefully make it, annoying enough, or brings enough attention to the citizenry that, again, they're going to take action, that they will not tolerate this type of accountability anymore. Speaking of our risk assessment, that's one thing we did this year. Again, Megan did every year, again, that's how we come up with our audits, and also a lot of our contract oversight work about how we're going to do it. Every year we do a risk assessment and an audit plan. And again, it's involved that we make sure that, we're looking in the right places with all of our information, trying to find those risks, allow us to do more focused audits, and again, engage more entities. And this is our approach, of which we've been taking since Megan's been here, and has been very successful. Just carryover audits. These are the carryover audits we're already conducting in fiscal year 18 that's coming over into fiscal year 19. So you can see we've got a number of audits underway currently that's being done. See, we're finishing up, for example, one of those is a P-card audit with Riviera Beach. And they've asked us to come in and look at more of their processes. Some of the things that was in the news last year about they were paying the insurance for former employees who were gone. So they asked us to look at that process, and we're coming in now, as we're finishing up this P-card audit, to look at not only their insurance, that issue, but their whole process of people who were former employees. What's the whole procedure? What's the procedure when somebody's leaving the organization? what do they do, and then are there any other benefits that they may be also out there paying for former employees that they shouldn't be paying for?
Madam Chair, I just was thinking, following up on Commissioner Romano's remark, how many about repeated offenders or something rising to threshold? How many of you referred to either the state attorney or law enforcement, just case numbers? You know?
Well, when you say repeat offenders, let me define that first of all, because a lot of things like in this case we talked about in Jupiter, and I don't want to speak, I'll let Mr. Ehrenberg speak for his office, but I mean, a lot of times when it comes to law enforcement, even if they're repeat offenders, it's still got to rise to the level of, to predicate an investigation. So
And that's
just
what I'm
because
asking, how many,
people-
have any risen to that
Yeah,
level?
we have had, yes, over the years, I mean, we've made a number of referrals, and we've worked with the state attorney's office, different law enforcement agencies. There's been, later on, I've got the summary, there's been 18 arrests that has been made from just in 8 years from our office of public employees doing bad things. So we've had 18 arrests directly as a result of our product, and that doesn't include the hundreds of other referrals that we've given to law enforcement, state, local, federal. We just turned over a case to the federal law enforcement that we've dealt with. So a number of these issues, but a lot of times it's not repeat offenders, it's first-time folks.
Thank you.
Did that answer
Yes, it
the
did.
question adequately? Okay, more on our risk assessment. Again, these are some of the areas that we're planning on looking at during the year. During this fiscal year, some of those areas that we're going to be looking at. Now, trends. I know, I wish Ms. Howell was here, because she loves, to hear about, she usually asks about what types of trends are we seeing. This is what we're seeing in trends overall, the best I can say that to kind of summarize them. Basically, internal controls. That's what it comes down to. We need to have better internal controls. And like I said previously, trust is not an internal control. That's when we usually hear, it's like, come on, why are you out here? Why don't we have good people? There's some, we just trust us. And that, again, under any government auditing standard, that's not one of those internal controls that are listed, trust. We need better written policies, procedures, better employee training. A lot of times we find they've got the policies in place, but they're not, the employees have no idea. We show up places and they have a policy. There was one audit we did. It wasn't until we was getting ready for the outbrief of the audit, we were citing them because they didn't have policies. They brought, oh, here it is, here's the policy. And it was some policy that had been sitting back. And I said, well, that's good that you had a policy, but that demonstrates we've been out here months doing this audit, and it's not until we're closing it down that you come running forward and show us you have a policy that had been sitting around. That's good, but what that shows is we need training and awareness that you have this policy to be able to follow the policy. Management review and oversight, and also insufficient documentation of procedures. And again, we use the reasonable person standard. A lot of times, one, if it's specific, sometimes it's in the regulation what is sufficient documentation. But other times, like back into what would the normal citizen, if they walk in the door and you told them we gave away so many $1,000s worth of tickets, what question would they ask that you could assure them that, hey, this didn't go to my brother or my sister or my friends? What would you tell them? And so we try to use those standards, but you got to have some documentation on expenditures. Okay, we're moving down training and outreach. Just this past 6 months, here's some of the people we've talked to, a lot of people in government, A lot of people in the, citizens, we go to citizens group, I'll talk about them. We speak at state, national training presentations, media, interviews, and public awareness, education, information that we put out. And again, I want to give a shout out to the county particularly. The county has me every Tuesday morning. They have a new employee orientation over in our building, and I go and I speak to them for 5 minutes, every new employee of the county, about our office, about just, here's who we are, here's what we do, give them some basic information. So the county has us speak to every new employee, and they also have us speak for a longer period of time. They have first-line supervisor course that they provide throughout the year, courses that they provide. And I personally, and again, I'm the one that personally goes and speak to them. So I want to say the county particularly has done a great job in welcoming us in, having us in to speak to employees, to try to educate them on who we are, some of their responsibilities, and to have that awareness. So county's doing a great job, and again, we're working with a number of the cities. It all depends on which city, various relationships. Most of the cities, good relationships, but I would like to be able to get in more with their new employees, with their supervisors, again, that proactive, preventative approach. These are just some of the places we've talked to. I've been on the radio this last 6 months on the Talk of the Palm Beaches. I don't know, that's on, I think, 95.6, one of the stations there, one of the talk radio stations that they had me on to talk about our office, what we're doing. Again, periodically, we get together with all the city managers and the senior leaders from the county to talk about lessons learned. And again, we take all of our projects that we've been doing and narrow it down. We anonymize them. I say it's like to protect the innocent so nobody's embarrassed. And so we try to go, okay, what did we find and what's a lesson learned that's maybe applicable to everybody? So we try to get together periodically with the city and the county leaders. Our internal auditors and IGs, we get together quarterly. I've speak at other places like Kiwanis, spoken at a couple of Kiwanis this time, Economic Council. Again, these are just examples of some of the places we go. Now, here's some of the other outreach we do. And I want to tell you, since Megan Gaylord, she is very active in the Institute of Internal Auditors, a number of state and national organizations. And she gets out to speak to a lot of people, and it's just not about auditing, it's about our office and about some of the unique things that we're doing in our office to spread some best practices, not just with us, but with other auditors and folks out and about. She spoke, for example, there at SAA, was the Association of Student Accounting at Florida Atlantic University. She spoke to them recently. You can hear her. If you look it up, she's got a podcast out there. They interviewed her. The AGA did a podcast with her talking about auditing, about what, some unique things we do in Palm Beach County, in particular data analytics. If you want to hear what data analytics is 101, it's like for me, I say data analytics for dummies. You need to listen to this podcast. It's great. It brings it down to the real basics, what data analytics is, and takes it out of that mystic area. I've spoken at the Florida Government Financial Officers Association on ethics in government and the IG's role. And likewise, Palm Beach Atlantic has had me there. They've had me there a number of times to speak to their leadership courses on ethics in government and leadership.
And thank you for speaking yesterday at the 12th Annual Ethics Seminar at FAU.
That'll be in our next 6 months.
Okay.
It was a great opportunity and a great seminar that was going on there. Those are some of the things we get to speak at with our colleagues. Okay, personnel and budget. Again, we're up now to 25 people in the Office of Inspector General starting this year at 63%. Why I have the few and the proud there is I like to make our correlation We are in the IG, we are the few and the proud. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us. I tell my folks, yeah, we're not fully staffed, we've got a lot out there, but I said the good news is we have job security. There's always plenty of work out there for us to do with our small staff. And I'm really proud, just like I'm an old proud Marine of the folks I served with. I am just so proud of the people that I work with here that are great folks who, every single person, when you have a small staff, has to come to the plate and be, there's no room for anybody who's really learning a lot or who's not producing 100%. Every person we have is producing just like my old Marine Corps. Well, I'm speaking of the Marine Corps. The last, on the 10th was the Marine Corps' 243rd birthday. And that was on the 10th. And on the 11th was, of course, was Veterans Day. And I want to recognize my fellow veteran here, Jeff Whaley, Air Force veteran right here, who is our IT guru and, again, he's the main guy who helped put this whole thing, the briefing together here. So, Jeff, thank you for your service to the country and to us. This is just, again, a breakdown of our numbers. Again, from that 40 person, what we had 23, that was 17 positions that we were short. I'd asked the county the year before last, I said, okay, I tell you what, I got it, we're all hard times here. I think if we just had 10 people, that would be minimally acceptable, that we could do our job adequately. So I said, even at that, the 10, if I could just have 4 people to do this. I got 0 and 28, but I want to thank the county. We're moving in the right direction. I got 2 extra positions for this fiscal year 17, or excuse me, this fiscal year 19, and we're putting them to use. So it's going to be 1 investigator and 1 auditor. This is really interesting, a legal update. Just as a background to this, the background of this slide is, this all revolves around a public records request. We had an investigation ongoing in one of the municipalities, and one of the members knew, we had to question them about the investigation going on of the city council. And so the member then requested from our office, they wanted a public records request, wanted the complaint that came in. They said, we want the complaint that started this whole thing. I want to see the complaint. We denied providing the complaint to him because under the statute, gives an exemption for Inspector General investigations, audits, contract, our work, that anything under that, our investigations are confidential exempt until the investigation is completed, and then the public can have anything that was involved in that. The complaints, all the evidence, they can have everything after the report is done. But this investigation was an ongoing investigation, and as such, we deemed that complaint, because the complaint when it came in not only started the investigation, but provided quite a bit of evidence that was involved in this investigation. Well, the person sued us, took us to court, and so on March 13th, they filed a petition asking the court to order us to provide him with a copy of the complaint related to the open investigation, and also pay his attorney fees involved under the state law. You can do this if somebody didn't properly follow the public records law. So the bottom line, the ruling in red there, that the judge ruled on August 28th that the complaint was, quote, information received, produced, and derived from the investigation, and was therefore exempt from disclosure until the investigation was complete. Well, they're still not happy, so they appealed that, so we're going in the appeal process. This is important because this has an effect not only on our office, but all local, local IGs. So this will have an impact, and all IGs are watching this case. So in the case, both who testified in there was Angie Rent and Calinthia Dillard. Where's Calinthia testified there? And they did a great job in testifying. And also Calinthia worked with the county in the case, because the county actually was the defendant. It was us and the county and their attorney, the county's attorney office, presented the case. And again, the very good relationship, working hand in hand with the county attorney there in preparing the case and bringing it forward. And they did an excellent job in presenting the case. And again, Calinthia did a great job working with her. Now, speaking of Calinthia, she didn't, originally I had on this slide the OIG, OIG superstar. She didn't like that, but she is a superstar, so I'm going to say it anyway. So just recently, in the past, Calinthia was recognized, I think it was the last 6 months I told you, she was recognized as one of the top 100 national black lawyers. She has already been recognized. She was recognized the Giraffe Award by the Palm Beach Women's Chamber of Commerce in honoring women who make a difference in the workplace and the community. That's passed. She keeps moving on here. In just this past 6 months, she was awarded the 2018 Attorney of the Year Award by the Florida Related Education Association for her work with the Florida Bar and in educating the community. And she's done so much involved in this. So she was recognized by the State Association. Just this past, I think it was last week or the week before, there was an insert in the Sun Sentinel, Legacy Magazine, recognized Calinthia as one of Florida's most influential and prominent women in business and industry. So she continues to excel. This is just stuff outside. The stuff inside, she's not only the general counsel, she's my deputy, she is my trusted advisor and consultant. I can't say enough of great things about Calinthia and all the good things that she does, not only for us, for the community, but for the state of Florida, for the attorneys. She represents the bar and the attorneys just so well. So that's my bragging on Calinthia, OIG superstar, or recognition, as you would like it put. Okay, where are we going? We're wrapping it up. Oh, I want to go back one before I get there. Where we're going in the future, again, we're going to be integrating more and more. If you notice, every time we're integrating more and more our audits, investigations, and we're trying to make sure we use the best of all of our folks, and not just when something comes in, it's an investigation or audit. We're doing a lot more joint type of products and using the expertise and knowledge of the whole group here. You're going to be getting our annual report in December for fiscal year 18. Planning a conference, that's on the next slide. And we're going to be expanding our contract oversight. So, and I put this little diagram on the right just to kind of demonstrate. We do very good on the procurement, the front end selection committee. We do very good in the auditing. We're going to be focusing some more of our efforts on the performance side of when the contract's already been led. We're going to be out on the scene and looking at the performance. Are we getting the money, so we're not looking at it after the fact in an audit? We're going to be doing more on-site, in-process monitoring of contracts and procurement type activities. And this is particularly important with the one penny sales tax to make sure that those millions of dollars are being spent properly. So we've got it on the front end and the back end. We've determined we need to do more, and we're going to be doing more in that in-process performance phase. And then finally, this coming year, September 25th through 27th, 19, is going to be the National Association of Inspector Generals Conference right here in Palm Beach County at the Hilton Convention Center. Hundreds of IGs from around the country. In fact, it's international. There are international IGs who will be here at the conference that our office is sponsoring for this coming year. And summary of our accomplishments in this past year. So now we're just looking at the past year, winding it down, I promise. not only we were reaccredited by the state Florida, the Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, so we were reaccredited this year. On that side, we were peer reviewed by the Association of Inspector Generals on a peer review this year. So we were to make sure that our credibility is maintained for, when we say in the IG world, truth, I mean, we have to be right. And so these folks help us in our standards and our evidence that when we put out a report, that we're right. And so they're the folks that help us keep those high standards. I was just, I'm on the board, the National Board of Association of Inspector Generals. I was just elected this year. Now I'm on the executive board, which is the interdecision-making, major decision-making board of the Association of Inspector Generals. To date, since we've started, to date, here's those dollars and cents we were talking about. $45 million plus in question costs, $23 million plus in potential cost savings, even money that's able to recoup, or cost that has potential future savings based on our recommendations. 142 referrals to law enforcement or either our local or state commission office, because we're the office that when people aren't sure who to call, they call us and we get it to the right place. And of those 142, there's been, again, 18 arrests or prosecutions directly as a result of our work specifically. Almost 800 recommendations. So for every year we've been in existence 8 years, it's about 100 recommendations average every year we make, 93% acceptance rate. And that's not bad. That's fairly along with a lot of the national average of IGs. They say, and Commissioner Cridell has brought this up before, if you have 100%, you're probably not doing something right, because if you're doing 100% and they agree with you all the time, maybe you're throwing too many softballs or not doing, So, but if nobody's agreeing with you, that's bad too. So this is about the average rate across the country. Thousands of calls. That's my presentation. Are there any questions or comments for us?
I think you hit everything. Thank you so much for the very thorough presentation, all the hard work that went into the presentation and the work you all do throughout the year. Thank you for your military service to the veterans. I just have a super quick question. Does the IG's office have any involvement whatsoever in any supervisor of elections issues or questions? Are there complaints coming into you? Just generally, people have asked if there's any role you have in that.
That's an excellent question. I have been asked if we're involved with any of the supervisor elections, and the answer is no. Supervisor election is a constitutional officer, and so we have no jurisdiction over any of the constitutional officers within Palm Beach County. So I've been asked about that. To my knowledge, we have not had any complaints. So we haven't had any complaints that's come into our office, but I have been asked by a number of the public who know what we do, and I tell them, no, we're not involved with that.
Well, that's probably a blessing.
Yes, it is.
Take it and run.
Yes.
Well, if that's all from the committee, I'll open it up to public comment. I didn't receive any comment cards, but any last-minute comments? Okay, any new business? Item 6. No new business. Madam Clerk, if the record would please reflect that Commissioner Romano did join us at the beginning of General Kerry's presentation. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.